And to the war between Russia and Ukraine, where the UK Defense Secretary says its nation and other allies of Ukraine are ready to support the embattled nation for negotiations to end the war and eventually secure a peace deal. Ahead of a top-level meeting in Paris today, Mr. John Haley says Ukraine's allies will help make the skies and seas safe, as well as secure the land once a peace deal is struck. Now, about 30 leaders will take part in this summit in person or online, and French diplomats say the technical work on providing security guarantees is now complete in the event of a ceasefire. Global Affairs analyst Paul Ejime joins me to discuss the potential of this summit. It's good to have you join us.
Hello, Olabide. Thanks for having me.
Right, we've seen the UK Defense Secretary saying that allies are ready to support Ukraine in this peace negotiation. But given Russia's current stance, what's the possibility of Moscow coming to the table anytime soon? And how do we evaluate the sincerity of Russia?
Let me say that seeing is believing. That it is said that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We have gone through this before. The diplomatic efforts ratcheted up after Donald Trump, and we have to give him credit because he appears the one that is moving the NATO allies, or the so-called. Now we have coalition of the willing countries. But the situation is this: Russia has given its position after they even reiterated during the meeting with Trump in Alaska. And even when this NATO Western leaders joined Ukrainian leader Zelensky to meet Trump, I don't think so much has shifted, because the question remains: who will form this so-called, security defense, and then what is Russia's response? Because that is what is determining. So long as Russia decides that it will not have NATO forces between the borders of Russia and Ukraine, I don't think it's going to fly. So all this is perhaps wait and see, as it were.
And while we're considering this, we also need to look at the potential of both parties in terms of military strength. French diplomats have said that technical work on the security, perhaps if a ceasefire deal comes in place, is now complete. But when you compare the strength of both parties, how likely is this ceasefire deal expected to come through?
There is a divergent opinion in either having a ceasefire or a peace deal. Russia prefers a peace deal and has also talked to President Trump into it. It is only the NATO countries that are now talking about a ceasefire. So there hasn't been any agreement on that. And when you talk about strength, I mean, I don't think modern warfare is not about the troop strength. But you can see what drones are doing, and this is a digital world, and that is fought both with technology and then intelligence. But let's face it, there is NATO countries are afraid to do anything without the support of the US. And that is the question. So long as they don't have the backing of the US, they're not likely going to make any move, like they have not done over the 3 years. It's only for the past 3 years. They have all been talking about sanctions against Russia, one sanction, about almost 6,000 sanctions. They have never talked about peace or negotiation. It's only Trump, let's give it to him, that is talking about bringing peace. And they're now trying to catch up. Because all of they've been doing is urging Zelensky on. And his, countrymen and women are dying. You see, the drone attacks every day. The same casualty is also being meted to Russia.
Mr. Jime, we've seen Russia making a statement, especially at the military parade that was in Russia. Let's look at the negotiation and the consistency of this process. President Zelensky has said that he will not trade land for peace. How is it possible for negotiations to actually move forward when there's still the concern of territorial sovereignty?
Well, in negotiations, it's about give and take. You cannot remain rigid. Okay, Russia is saying that some, territories that are in Ukraine. Remember, they were all the same people, the same USSR, before the disintegration. So Russia is saying, Putin is saying that there are Russian citizens that are now in Ukraine that are being discriminated against, and that he wants that they will want those people to come back to the administrators and Russia. But Zelensky is saying no, they cannot cede. But the point is, when you begin to see the reality in the war front, you will now know whether to give an inch or not to give. Russia can take casualties, but Western countries cannot. And there is a limit to which these NATO countries can support Ukraine. I think the leader, Zelensky, should advise himself that all these other countries that are also supporting, they are not doing so free. They are all eyeing what they can get from Ukraine. Ukraine is going to pay back. Some of these things they are doing will be based on Ukrainian, recruits through Ukrainian resources. So is it worth the blood of thousands of people? And when will it end? Every war has always ended on the negotiating table. When is it wise now for these two people to get back to the negotiating table? But Putin is the senior partner in this negotiation, whether we like it or not. So Ukraine will have to cut its losses and then know what to give. In negotiation, you win some and then you lose some. Many lives are being lost daily. And then those urging him on are not being fair to what is happening to that country. One is not supporting Russian invasion, but at the same time, you want to be pragmatic. You want to be realistic, to know that if you are facing an enemy that you cannot defeat, well, common sense dictates that at one point you have to, give in and then cut your losses instead of losing everything. That is my position, particularly when it is clear that Russia had already maintained that it will not have NATO forces around its borders, and neither with the US. So what is good for the gander is for the goose is good for the gander. Let not. This is not a war that started today.
Right.
Remember that there used to be a pro-Russia president in Ukraine, but the NATO countries were able to remove him, and then now have planted the pro-Western Zelensky. So this is superpower power play that is going on.
Mr. Jime, there's also the possibility of this alleged ceasefire provoking Russia further. At the summit, the United Kingdom, its allies have said that they will help make the skies and the seas safe. Does this point to possible long-term military presence in Ukraine post this war? And is this not going to provoke Russia further?
That is the question. And how far can they go? Because it's one thing to promise, and another, will they have troops on the ground? Will they be allowed? Because once they begin to take casualty, that can cost the position, cost them their position. They're not going to go too far. But Russia is ready to do that. Russia is in a different plane. Others talk about democracy and whatever. It's running its own and can take casualties and has seen that before, fighting so many wars. Putin is not somebody that you joke with. He understands everything about NATO countries, knowing that their weaknesses, for instance, and at times they will fall apart. When it gets to the nitty-gritty of anybody bringing troops, They are not likely going to do so. They are all looking behind to see what America is going to do. And America has said, Trump has said he's not going to deploy any American troops. So who is going to do it? Who is going to bear the cat? So the point is, let Zelensky go back and know what it can give, and then maximize whatever it is that it can get, and cut its losses. I keep repeating that word because there has to be some losses on both sides. Probably it is a case of determining that Russia cannot have everything that it wants. It cannot take Crimea. It cannot take all the other many of the territories it's asking for. It's a case of saying, okay, let's cut it here, take this up, and then we go with this. And that will be the end to it. But if you mentioned it, look at what Russia is doing. Just as these people, the coalition of willing, Russia is also, making contact with allies, with China, with South Korea, with India. So it is there busting up. So you are right, it will lead to an indeterminate conflict between the two countries.
The impact of this war on Ukrainians and Russians is one that cannot be described. For many Ukrainians, especially, that have been asking for accountability, peace without justice, especially for crimes, war crimes especially, may feel quite hollow. How do international allies like this reconcile the push for a peace deal and also the demand for accountability?
It's going to be difficult, but there have been, let's face it, this is war situation. There have been war crimes on both sides. I mean, you cannot just say that it's only the Russian side or the Ukrainian side. So, but that will settle once you have a peace deal, or if you like an unlikely situation of a ceasefire. Because after the ceasefire, you are still going to have what is called a long-term peace that will determine these two countries. When you have a buffer zone between them and you deploy troops, they are going, at one point, these are neighbors. They must leave. They do not require all that. Those deployments will not remain there forever. For how long will any country allow its troops to be deployed between the borders when every country today have, they all have their own domestic problems? Look at what is happening in Gaza, for instance. But the point is that I think the NATO forces, NATO countries are not being fair to Ukraine by always insisting that they are going to support it. They are, every time they meet, it's about how much weapon they are going to give. And who is dying from this fight? It's the Ukrainians and not the other NATO countries. So that should, warn Zelensky that a time will come when his country, men and women, will become fatigued of and tired of fighting war. And nobody knows what will happen. But for take it or leave it, Russia can take casualties. Russia can has the staying power, but Ukraine does not have. And none of these Western countries or NATO countries can withstand Russia. All of them put together without the American forces.
Well, we'll wait out to see the outcome of this summit by these 13 nations, especially on a ceasefire deal. But that's a fine place to leave the conversation for now. Thank you for talking to us, Global Affairs Analyst, Holly Jime.
Thank you very much for having me.